Loop.
The other
Jockey,
one.
have you heard of Loop?
I haven't.
We'll tell you about it. It's the lifestyle app that brings together the best of mobile money and banking worlds through a simple platform that delivers payment, credit, and saving services, while at the same time offering personalized journeys and deals to complete your interests and needs. It's a lot more.
So life is like a loop, isn't it? Everything that you need to do, and that's brought to you by NCBA. You can imagine everything that you do, you want it to be convenient, right? You don't want to have to go far to make this payment. You don't want to have to go far to look for this other thing. It's a way of life that empowers you with the necessary tools to make sure that all your solutions are made effortlessly. So welcome to the world of Loop. It's the one-stop shop lifestyle app which enables you to manage all your bank and mobile money accounts on one app, transfer money from your account, pay your utility bills, and set up standing orders. You can get access to loans and overdraft facilities and discover many, many more things. So you can imagine an overdraft of 100,000 shillings, a personal loan of 3 million shillings, and you can do all of that from the comfort of your Loop.
Yeah, you no longer have to say, let me go to the bank. Oh my God, I'm so late in going to the bank. You have Loop. You do everything there at the comfort of wherever you are, right? Whether it's class, whether it's out in the field, or whether it's at home, wherever you are. Okay? So our conversation continues about disaster management in schools.
Right, so we're at the point whereby we're going towards response. And it's one of the four that you mentioned.
Yeah.
At the time, where, like I just imagine on Friday where everything was going crazy, early in the morning, you don't know who's in there, you don't know if the fire is still burning. What are you actually supposed to do? But I want to go before that just a little bit. When you talk about documentation and procedure and policy that is in place, for example, do you think in your mind that all schools that have dorm facilities, boarding facilities, are aware that there's standard procedure that you should only have so many beds in a room, or that a particular kind of mattress that you should be using, or that when you're saying you bring your own mattress to school, we want it to be like this? Or are we saying don't store plastic, like you have the buckets or whatever, don't store them in the room because these are natural flammables? Do you think that there's a knowledge or awareness across board of some of these things? Because that's some of the things that you teach, to say that there's certain things that should be nowhere near a living facility because we're trying to do that thing where we don't say that it won't happen, but we are saying in the event that it should happen, we are trying to be prepared and reduce the severity of damage. Do you think such things exist even as we look at response?
Yeah. Some things exist and then some things we assume exist and they don't, right? Because just because something is a policy, just because something has been put out by the Ministry of Education or even the national government as such, that doesn't mean it's being implemented, right? We know that. We know that, right? So the question becomes, why is it not being implemented? Okay?
Yeah.
So if, for example, the board of governors or a school principal has a level of autonomy, right, and bravado or whatever it is, impunity, right, with which they can make decisions and not be held accountable, then I can see where there's going to be, a disregard, total disregard for those directions, even if they know it, that they're supposed to. And then there's a very common assumption that people have that, it can't happen here. How? We have this, we have that. So people focus on, but we have this. We have very strong boys. We have, that can do this. Or we have... But then what you don't understand is that is really not your area of expertise. So, you're better off, dealing with having protected or tried to follow the protocol and not having worked for it, not maybe having worked in those rare incidences, than not, the kind of situation where we are seeing here. So it's a very common occurrence, right, where people just disregard it. And like I said, it's a reflection of society. If someone knows that they can get away with it, if people can have looked at the history and they have seen that such and such a person was accused of something similar and they got away with it. Now, the pain here is that we're dealing with parents who have lost their children that they took to school barely 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
right? So people do not make that connection, is understanding the implications that there are of the decisions that are being made. And then there's also the financial component. People sometimes are doing the math in their head. If I can get this bed, I can get a bed in here this way, that way,
I can have more
right?
students.
Or I can build a house over here in the middle or on top of this, but you're not, when I go to places, sometimes I just get nervous just looking at access, simple things like access. So unfortunately, people sometimes are really motivated by the money, right? And then we ourselves as parents want to take all our children to this one school because this one school performs in such and such a way. So if I come with a note from somebody who's deemed really important in this society, and there's going to be pressure if I don't take this student. Like I said earlier, my mother was a principal, right? And so when we knew we had December visitors, right, who came to see us in our home with letters from such and such, or who are friends of friends 10 times removed, right? And they were coming to talk to my mother so that during selection time in January, a couple of this, that, or the other can happen, right? We knew that growing up. So these are the pressures that the principals live with daily, right? So it could have been that, my mom got pressure at the house from friends, right? Or people from church. But what about the pressures I didn't see, which is the letters from maybe people who
Minister
are in her, so what do? You just tell them, okay, I'll accept them if you bring a bed. Where do you put that bed?
The question that I want to ask, and you laid it out well. Why is it that there were not more schools doing well?
Why is it that there were not more
schools doing well? Because if there are only a few, the pressure will be unsurmountable. Because having been a teacher, I knew of headmasters who were headmasters of these popular schools. There was a class they set aside for those requests.
Precisely.
Meaning those who qualify and go through the system of qualifying, you regular. Then one class. When you come with those requests, that is where you end up. Now, because this is one of the advantages of being old, you get to have lived a little longer than many people, so you get to see. But I was a teacher. You then realize that these so-called good schools had an advantage over the other schools.
Precisely.
It wasn't visible at first, but part of it was the alumni, the interest they took in their school. 2, the age of the school and people who had been in that school, the alumni, some were in government, some who were. So that school tended to get, those schools rather, preferential treatment in terms of the school, the students that they want, in terms
even
of
the teacher,
the resources.
the head that is posted.
Precisely. Yes. Standards had to be maintained. Okay? Now, other schools would come up and would also be good. The constant in any of these schools, if you look at the educators, the teachers who are there, was the levels of commitment that you saw with the teachers. In the schools that do well, that is usually a constant, whether it's a private school or whether it's a public school. Now, what is it that made these teachers that committed? Because there was no joking about it.
Okay.
All right? And the students knew that this is a place where you take your studies seriously.
Correct. So...
And many of these schools that I speak of, you've never heard of a fire.
True.
Never.
So I know not to respond to a question with a question, but there's a question here.
Usually that's the best way to respond to a question.
What comes first? A teacher who comes into the institution committed, or a teacher who comes into the institution and realizes, here, these are the standards, you do not play. Okay? So then the other question becomes, why do we have this tiered system that's so consistently colonial?
Yeah.
Right? Why do we have this system in the first place? Why have we not worked at that macro level, meso and micro level, to really make it to where it's about the quality of education across the board, and not similar, but equitably, right? So that if it's in the rural areas, right, that level of education is relevant for the students there. They understand, they're not being told that A is for apricot, right? They're being told A is something that is relevant to them. So why have we not contextualized education in that sense? And in doing so, you remove yourselves from the institution, the brick and mortar, or the place, the headmaster there, or the headmistress, or the principal there. It becomes about the thing. And the thing in this case is an education, a learning that is relevant and contemporary. And that makes sense to the person that is going to it. So the teachers come in also very aware. So when you look at our teacher development as well, when you look at our curriculum, okay, our curriculum.
Who creates the standards? Who creates that ecosystem that when you walk into, here, usually it's a head teacher, because there are institutions where you'll find there are standards, then they bring in a new head teacher and everything goes belly up.
Yes.
Head teacher. Very important.
Very, very similar to organizational culture. The organizational culture in this studio is dependent upon the leaders, right? So similarly, you will find that in different schools, it is going to be that way. Yes, it is the head teacher, but that head teacher has someone above them. They know they are accountable, whether it is to the alumni who are calling that head teacher to really stay consistent, or whether it's the Ministry of Education or what have you. So there's multiple systems.
Let me talk as a former head teacher. Those people don't really matter. Not really. If you have an interest in actually ensuring that these students do well, you will surpass the expectations of the board,
For sure.
The Ministry of Education. You will, because you're focused on how do I ensure that this institution works and runs well and that the students do well. That's the focus. And it will show.
It will. It will.
And you can even turn around situations that previously people had assumed could not be turned around.
And you're going to have the resources to be able to operationalize that.
Yes.
If you do not have those resources, and that's why I'm talking about equity, not equality, equity. If you have those resources, then we're going to be able to protect those children that need to go to boarding, right, schools, from the catastrophic outcomes that we are having, because the resources are going to be within reach of the principal, the teachers, the matron, the watchmen, etc. down the line.
How to bring up the conversation back to like schools and disaster management and response and preparedness now, right?
Yeah, preparedness.
Is there anywhere where people can get information? The people who are watching this and listening to this, and they have children in school and they have relatives in school, and they're thinking, okay, so how do I know whether that school is actually prepared for a disaster?
Engagement in the schools, right? And sometimes that it's so weird, because like we were saying here, sometimes people have already decided this child is going to this school by all means, right? So then it doesn't, the level of trust that you have that this child is going to be cared for is presumptive. It's very presumptive, right? So I did reach out to my mother yesterday to ask her, what she thought, and she said one of the things that has changed, she's no longer a principal, is that the level of parent engagement does need to be more valued and considered. But then the backslap to that is that the more some parents are involved, they're leaving their children in this school, they are seen as these activists, vichwangumus, and they don't know that what's going to happen to their students. So they kind of just get put in that box, which then continues to perpetuate the situations that we have, where parents know, right? Whether they visit the school or not, they could talk to their students and find out their children. But then what are they going to do? So the level of advocacy. But once you understand what the threats are, like right now, parents are really going to call to question and want to know what's going on in the schools. And then, like I said, over time, it's going to seem like it's getting better. And, all the recommendations and lessons that we're supposed to learn that we never learn, right, will have kind of been put together and have dwindled, gone off. And then the next time, and we are together, we're talking about something similar, right? And this is a constant. And it's the battle that people that work in emergency management and disaster management have to deal with.
Should disaster be included in the curriculum somewhere?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
How?
From the time, I'll give an example. and I'll use another country, not as a judgment call, but in Japan, for example, where we know that earthquakes are the largest hazard, right? When you look at the systems in place, going back to mitigation, structural and non-structural, they are relevant to that country, relevant to the people in the rural areas that live in the mountains, that live in the urban. So they have actually disaggregated that, the practices. And what you see is that when it comes to the curriculum, children are taught, because earthquakes are the prominent disaster hazard, right? They are taught what to do in the event of one. But not only are they taught what to do, the other systems, remember it's an ecosystem, its interdependencies are also key, right? So when it comes to, Ndu was asking about the architecture. When you look at the architecture in that country, it's such that it's responsive to levels of earthquakes, right? So you have a coupling of not just one thing, the curriculum, or because we have a disaster management office, you have it's a multiplicity, right? And in that convergence, then you have a better managed disaster. And that doesn't mean there's not going to be earthquakes in Japan where we hear about. They still exist, right? But even when they come, you can see that they used the ultimate information that they had, scientific knowledge, indigenous knowledge, the technology that is available, and the systems of learning too. The other reason I really like what you've talked about education is that you find that children have a way, once you teach children something and they understand it, right? They have a way of trying to influence their parents, and they might sometimes shame a parent, like, oh no, mama, you're not supposed to be doing this way, and you're like, this kid. But there's nothing. But then there's nothing you can do about that kid. That kid will insist. Mama, your gas is almost running. Yeah, or teacher said, or you need this, or you need this. So whether you want to hear it or not, you know that child knows something. And eventually that child might have a level of influence. At a minimum, that child knows. And that child also knows that this is the right thing, and you as a parent are choosing not to follow through with it, right? So there's that level. The syllabus question is key. We should be learning about it. And not just learning about, again, coming back to apricots, about hurricanes that are not
relevant.
What's the relevance? And typhoons. It's good to know about them generally, but when it comes to the actual delving into material, it should be what's relevant to River Nyando that floods, or whatever the threat is, at the time.
At a certain age, children will listen to their teachers and take in everything they're told vis-a-vis what the parents tell them. The parent will say this, the child will say, Mommy, Daddy, teacher said.
Teacher said, and that should be the name of the program. Teacher said. Teacher said.
Jackie, thank you very much for joining us today. We still have some 2 issues, but we'll invite you again.
Would love that.
Yeah, come and let's learn more about disaster management and preparedness and all those things, and mitigation measures.
Absolutely.
Because it's not just in schools. It happens. It happens at homes. It happens. Buildings collapse. So what do you do if the building is collapsing and you're inside, or you've been told that your building is collapsing and you know your children are there and you're not there? What happens? What do you do? We need to have regular conversations around this. So we'll invite you again.
Absolutely.
Joki Morumba is academic leader for Disaster Management Executive Program at Strathmore University Business School. And we thank you very much for tuning in to Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room, live on Spice, on KTN, on YouTube, on Facebook. We'll sort out Radio Garden. Yes, we understand that there's an issue with Radio Garden. But we'll be back tomorrow at 6 a.m.